Hey everyone, and welcome to the practical video of web page styling, #CSS. There aren't really basics in CSS, so in this practical lesson, we'll be using some of the many CSS elements. In our HTML, the basics practical video, we built a web page that consisted of headings, some paragraphs, a table, a form, a button, a link, some lists, and an image. And using this very same web page, we'll be applying some CSS and it will end up looking like this. Still using the same HTML elements, just more pretty. So we have our heading, our paragraphs, we have our form, we have our table, we have our lists, a link, a button, and an image. We'll be styling our web page using the following elements: font family and text alignment, margins, some padding, borders, a background color and text color, transitions, and lastly, hovering and opacity. I'll explain these elements in detail once we start with our coding. To start off our lesson, we need to open our text editor and save the existing file type as CSS. You can name the CSS file to anything you see fit. Just make sure there aren't spaces in between if the name consists of more than one word. Also remember to save the CSS file to the folder we created in our HTML the basics video. So I'm gonna call mine, I'll call it cookies, and save it as .css, and it's in our folder, so that's good. Next up, we need to open our web page in our editor as well to switch the order of our sections. There's a very, very good reason for this, trust me. So how we're going to switch the order is that the form section needs to come below the paragraph, the table below the form, the lists below the table, and the link below the lists. So we need our form below our paragraph. So you just copy that, you cut, and you put it below the paragraph div. And the table is fine, so we need to add our lists below our form. So you copy all that, you cut, not below the form, below the table, my bad. And then the link, we cut below our lists. And then we have our button, and then we have our image, which is absolutely fine. So you're going to save that, go back to Chrome, and refresh, and you'll see that the order has changed. Yeah, cool. Now we need to link our CSS file to our web page. So we go back to our editor, and all the way in our head tag, we add a link. The relationship between this document and the external document is a style sheet. You're going to mention the type of the document, the external document, so it's a text, slash, CSS. Then we define where this document is linked. So the name dot CSS. You close and you save. Now, I prefer adding CSS externally to the web page. It's just a lot neater for me, and you'll see later on when you work with multiple pages for just one website, you would only need to change styling on the website CSS file, and the changes will be applied to all the pages using that CSS file. And for this lesson, I'll also make use of inline CSS, but only if it's necessary. I'll show you when we add styling to our image. Remember in our basics video, I had mentioned the importance of uniquely identifying tags such as divs. And the reason behind this is that whatever styling you want to apply to a specific tag, it will only be for that tag and not for all the div tags found on the page. I'm going to show you what I mean. Um, I'm just going to show you an example if we're not using IDs and just straight up div tag. As you can see, there are quite a lot of those in our web page. So I'll write div. You don't need to write this down. It's just an example. I'm gonna add a background color, yellow, and then we close our div. Oopsie. Then we save. Then we go back to our web page and we refresh. Now, as you can see, the yellow background color is applied to all the divs found on the page. So now let's use the very same color, but now we're going to apply it to a specific ID. So let's go back to our editor and let's say we're going to use the headings. So now we don't use div anymore. We just use an ID. We call the ID headings. Then we save and we refresh. You'll now see that the yellow background is only applied to the heading section. And that is the importance of IDs and classes in a web page. So a minor FYI to remember is that in CSS, HTML tags are defined as they are. For example, here we have our div tag. It doesn't have an ID, it doesn't have a class, it doesn't have anything. So we define it just as it is. For example, the p tag as well. If I write the p tag in CSS, I'll just write p, then I open and I close with all my styling in between, right? So that's what I meant by HTML tags are defined as they are. And then hey man, let's just remove this. With IDs are defined with the hashtag symbol, and classes are defined with a full stop in front of their name. So whatever change you make to that class, it will be applied to all the elements in your HTML page using that particular class. So with all that said, let's officially start styling our web page. The first div to style will be our headings div, this one here. And for this, we'll apply a different font and align this content that lies in between the divs, so our headings, in the center of the page. Now I'm only going to make use of one, so I don't need the rest. You can either remove them or comment them out. Oof. There you go. Then we close. Whichever you see fit, really. Now, I use what I call a hack to find a suitable font for me to use. So for this, I would open a Word document and I will write down the word that I have on my web page and the word that I would like to style. And highlight it, of course, and then go to my fonts and select a font that would be suitable for my web page. Now, in this instant, my favorite font to use will be Freestyle Script. So my headings are going to look like that. Then I'll go back to my text editor. Let's save here first. Go to my CSS and I'm going to write that down. So to change the font used, you'll use an element called font family. And for this, we'll be using Freestyle Script. That's the one that I got on the Word document. And we close off our element with a semicolon, and then we want to center our words in the middle. So we're going to use an element called text align, and we're going to say center semicolon. Then you save, go back to your web page, and refresh, and you'll see that you have your heading with the font that you want, and it's also centered in the middle of the page. Our next element to style will be our paragraph section, and for this we're going to style it using a margin. Now a margin is used to create space around elements outside of any defined borders. Now in theory it sounds a bit confusing, so rather let me show you what that means. You don't have to write this down just as yet. So let's go here and is it paragraph or paragraphs? It's paragraphs. Okay. First, let's add a border. Okay, no, let me do it. Sorry. Let me add a border around the paragraph section. And I'll explain this, I promise. And then let me just save it rather. Then refresh the page. So you can see nothing's really changed much with regards to the paragraph section except for the fact that we added a border around it. So now we're going to add margining around it. Remember, margining defines the space outside an element in a defined border. So let's add a margin of maybe, let's say 10, no, 20 pixels. Then we save. Let's refresh our page. And you can see there is some space around our defined border. I really hope it makes sense now because it used to confuse me quite a lot in the beginning until I actually applied the practical of that entire sentence. So now let's just make this look pretty, our paragraph. We can remove the border. At the margin, let's make it 50 px rather because 20 is too small. We save, go back here, and we're going to italicize our paragraphs using the I tag or the HTML I tag. So an I here, we close the I, and open another I, and we close it. And then you save, then refresh the page. Now it looks a little bit more presentable. Next up, we're going to add padding around our form div. Now padding is used to generate space around elements inside of any defined borders. Remember, with margins, it was outside of any defined borders. Padding is space inside any defined borders. I know if it's a mess. But let's just code that in as an example, just so I can show you what it means. Actually, you can code this too. And our element, what's it called? Our ID, it's called a form. So form, oof, and we add padding. And I guess let's use 20px for this one. Save that and refresh. So it's not going to make much of a difference now. So rather, let's just add some boarding as well. I think we'll see the difference better. Ooh, border, 2px, solid, and black. Save and refresh. Okay, it's a little bit better, but I need more drama. Let's make this 50px. I think that's better. Come back and refresh. So now you see that with padding, it adds space around an element content inside of init defined borders. So here's our border, and then we have our element right here, and we have some space inside. And then with a margin, the space is added outside a border. So even if we go back, you really don't need to do this. It's just to show. Actually, no. Let me just do this. I just want to make the differences a lot clearer. There you go. So you see the difference. With the margin, there's no padding in between the box or the border. The space only lies external from the border. And this is with margin. And then with padding, the space lies inside the defined border. I really hope it makes much more sense now because it does get a lot confusing. So next up, we're going to add borders around our table and our table headers. So let's go back to our editor. Remove the border from the paragraph section because we're not going to be using that anymore. Now, with the table, we are going to use the HTML elements straight up. No IDs, no nothing, because it's going to apply styling to the section, and we only want styling to be applied to the table alone. So we're going to add a border around the table first. So we say table. And we use border 1px solid black. I should probably explain what this means. So border is an element. It's a CSS element. These three parameters stand for the width, sides of the border, the type of border it is, and the color of the border. You can use your normal color name, or you can use the hex color code for it. So I know for black, the hex color code will be 6 zeros, but I mean, I'm not going to get into that now. So we use pixels as our unit for measurement in this instance. And by solid, it means that the border is straight. It's not dotted. It doesn't have anything funny in between. On W3 schools, they have like a whole list of the types of borders. I prefer using a solid because it's just more professional, especially when it comes to a web page, and it's just neater. Okay, so we're going to add the border around our table, and we also want some border around our table headers. So we're going to say th, because that was the table header. And I guess we can use the same concept, but now here's the difference. Here's the difference. This difference also applies to the margin and the padding. If we just use the word border, right? Just the word, not border bottom or anything. If we use border, that means you apply styling to all the sides of the border, or all the sides of the section, or all the sides of the element that you want to style. So it will be your left, right, top, and bottom. If you specify that you want a border just only for the bottom part, you need to define it as border bottom. And then you apply that styling only to the bottom of your element. So the top, the left, and the right will stay blank because you only specified that you want a border at the bottom. Same thing with padding, my bad, and margin. There's margin top, margin left, right, bottom. Same thing with padding, left, right, top, and bottom. All right, so I just thought I should just make that clear what it means. But anyway, let's just save and go back and refresh the page. When we scroll down, we'll see that we have a border around our table and we have a bottom border for our column names. This is, yeah, it's pretty interesting. Next up, we're going to add a background color and text color to our lists section. This section over here. I make use of a certain website called colorhex.com. I'll post this as well in the description box to get all the different hex codes for whichever color I'd like to use. And that's the color that I'll be placing in my CSS file. So for example, we have this color over here, and you get the different shades and the tints of the color. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I use that, or if I'm too lazy, I'll make use of paint as well, because it also offers that feature. I just have to look for the right color. That's a lot of work. Anyway, I already have the colors that I'd like to use defined over here. So I'll be using them for my background, just one of them, the top one. I'll be using this color for my background. You can use any color that you like, really. So let's copy this, go back to our editor and into our CSS. ID, lists. It is lists, right? Yes, it is. Then we have our background color. And we have our text color, which is white, or 6 ifs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so background color and color is pretty basic. I don't think I need to explain that in detail. Um, just know that color stands actually for the text color. All right. I don't know why they don't call it text color. Or maybe there is an element called text color. Actually, I don't know about it, but we call our we color our text using the color element, and background is for the background. Okay, so let us save and refresh our page. So now we see our background color is colored with that beautiful pink. I don't know what it's called, and our text color is white. So I think we need a little bit of padding because I don't like how it's so close to the edge. So let's just add that as well. And 20 px. semicolon, and save. Then we go back and refresh. Nice, and we have some space, so now the text is no longer so close to the edge. Next up, we're going to change the color of a visited link. Now, when a link is visited in Chrome, I think it's a Chrome thing, the text color changes to like a, I don't know if it's a purple or a blue, but it's very possible to change this to suit the color of whatever it is that you want to use on your web page, just so you can keep it uniformed and all of that. So let's go back to our text editor and code that in. So now if we come back to our HTML, we can see that our links make use of an anchor tag. So that is the specific tag that we would like to style, not the ID, because then it would style a section and not the actual anchor tag. So we're going to use a and a visited property. And then you can color that to anything you want. So I already have my colors here. I'm going to use this one and paste. Then save, and we go back to our page and we refresh, and we see that our link or our visited link is now pink. You can use any color, but I was just trying to show you that you can actually change the color of visited links, which I think is pretty cool. Now, remember when I said there's a good reason for all the switching that we did earlier? Yeah, so I left the last two elements, which are the button and the image, to show the CSS transition effects and other cool effects like opacity and hovering. We're going to start with the transition effects for our button. Transitions are used to change the element gradually from one style to another. And to create a transition, you would need to specify two things: the CSS property on which you want to add the effect and the time duration of the effect. So let's code that in. So we're going to use the button element, not a div, just the button. And we're going to give our button some width and height sizes. So for this transition, we want to change the width and the height of the button. Just thought I should just make that clear. So the width, let's give it 150 pixels. The height, 50 pixels. And for our we use the transition element to create our transition effect. So we've already initialized our width and height, so now we just write them here again. The width, and we want the transition duration to last for only 2 seconds, so we just say 2s. And the height, we also want it to last 2s. And let's just separate that, and then we add a hovering effect. So hover is just when you move the mouse over something. So button, hover, moment. So we're going to add a new width and a height for the button when we hover over it. We want the button width and height to change, or the sizes to change. So 200 px, and the height, let's make it 100 px. And then we save and refresh our page. We see that the button is bigger, So when we move our mouse over the button, the size changes. Only when you hover over it. When you remove the mouse, it goes back to its size. I like that. Super cool. To wrap up our lesson, we want to show a text when we hover over an image. And to achieve this, we need to add one more div to our image div or our image section. We're going to rename the div ID and we're going to add a class. It's a very important exercise because I want to show you the use of classes in our CSS, even though I did explain it a lot earlier on. These last effects are going to be quite a handful because we're going to use hovering and opacity and other CSS elements like positioning and all of that. So I don't want to waste any more time. Let's just open up our text editor and go to our HTML file. We're going to use inline CSS to resize our image. So we write this as style, then the width, um, no, hold on, I'm starting the wrong thing. My apologies. There you go. Style and the width, which is going to be 500 px, semicolon, and the height, which is also going to be 500 px, and then you close your semicolon. Then we rename our div ID to hover underscore image, hover underscore image, and we give our image tag a class name of image. Then we're going to add another tag just below um, the image element, or another div tag, and we're going to give it a class name of text. And then this is the text that we want displayed when we hover over our image. So I'll call mine gingerbread man and I'll close off the div. Cool. So we're basically done when it comes to the HTML part of it. And we save and we go back to our CSS. I'm going to be talking quite a lot here. So first let's start with our hover image tag, because that's like the parent tag. Why do I keep saying hover? Hover underscore image. Close that up. So we'll be using the position element, and for this position element we'll be using the method of relative. So what this means is that we are placing the element relative to its normal position, and that means if we apply um, maybe a left width, the element will move the X amount of whatever you set the width to be from its relative, from its normal position. I hope that makes sense. I really do. So relative. And then we need to specify the height and the width of the div. In this instance, I want it to be similar to that of the image. So the width, which is 500 px, and the height, which is also 500 px. Next up, we're going to use the transition element on our image class, which is this one over here. Here you go, our image class that when we hover over it, the effect comes in more gradually, I think. And yeah, I think that's the easiest way to explain this. I actually was having trouble to try and explain this to myself in the easiest way. So I really, really hope you get it. But in any case, so let's define our class, which is image. And then we're going to define our duration, which is 0.5 seconds. And using another method called ease, because you want it to be nice and smooth. Yeah. Next up will be styling the text that we want seen when we hover over the image. And here it is. So we're going to define it using class text. Right. And it too will apply the transition of 0.5 seconds with the ease method, because we want to, how do I put this? When we hover on our div content, we want our image to be opaque and we want our text to be seen. So both the image and the text need to work together, that they both, how do I put this? That the effects are similar. So one doesn't beat the other or whatever, because you might find it in an instance that, for example, we put the transition of the text to maybe 2 seconds. Then when we hover over the image, then it would last longer than that of the actual image. Guys, I really hope I make sense. I mean, if I don't make sense, please just let me know in the comments below, and I'll try to simplify it the best way that I can. But we are basically just setting the transition effects for both the image and the text to be similar, because we want a, a gradual effect when we hover over our div or our hover image section. Okay, then next up we're going to use another element called opacity. So this just means how transparent an element is. If it's 1, then it's very visible. So anything above 1 or anything above 0 um, makes it extremely visible, and anything 0 and below means that it won't show at all. I hope I got that right. So in this case, we don't want our um, text element to show without us hovering over the image or the div. So when we refresh our page, our text is not going to show until we actually hover over the section or the div content. Cool. All right, cool. I hope that makes sense. We're going to make use of another element called position, but we already saw this one. And we're going to use a method called absolute. Now, absolute, I love absolute because that means you can position um, the element anywhere you want on the web page without any restrictions, without anything. So because you want this text element to be above, not above, above, no, inside, I guess, inside our image, um, we're going to apply the absolute method, because if, for example, we don't apply it or we don't apply position at all, um, the sequence will be we're going to have our image, and then below our image will be like a new row, and in this new row then we'll have our text, and which is what we don't want. So we want our text to be on top of our image. Okay, yes, no? Cool. I hope it makes sense. So now we're going to use the top element for vertical alignment, and we're going to give that 250px. Then left for our horizontal alignment, and we're going to give that 250px. So this is basically how we want our text position. It has to be 250px or pixels away from the top of our section, and it has to be 250 pixels left away from our section or our image. I really hope that makes sense, guys. Then we're going to use a background color for our text. Is that a nice color that I like? I'll just want to use this one. And our text color. And then, what did I do wrong here? There you go. There is an element called font size, also very similar to Word here. It's this, basically. So you can increase the font size or you can decrease the font size, and that's a similar concept also used in CSS. Font size. So we're going to set our font to 16 pixels. Then we're going to add some padding. I need to explain this. So you'll see that once we're going to hover and over our image, our text is going to be in something that looks like a little block. So the only reason why we use padding is because we don't want our words or wording to be too close to the edge of this block. Okay, right? I hope that makes sense. Also, we're going to use a shorthand property. You can learn more about this on the W3 Schools page. So there's padding properties that we're going to assign for the top and the right. So let's just write that in, 16px and 32px. Now, if we use a shorthand property like this, we actually have to define all four sides, which is top, bottom, left, right. And this would be the top, this would be right. The next one would be bottom and then left, which will be 0px for both. And because we're not using them, we don't need to write them. So that settles this then. Then lastly, we need to align our text in the center. Cool. No man. And that covers the text class. Lastly, we're going to define the hovering effect. So I'm going to write this down first and then I'm going to explain what this means. Again, hover. So now, this section, all right, let me not highlight that because I doubt anyone can see. That section just means that when you hover over the div, you need to set the image into a lighter, I don't want to say a lighter transparency, but a lighter opacity. So zero point 0.3 just means that um, because 0 means we don't see the image at all. And as it increase, we get to see the image more and more. So now we're increasing this to zero point 0.3, and then we're only going to see like a very light shade of the image when we hover over the div. So that's what that means. And I hope that makes a lot of sense. And then next up, we need to do the same thing for the text. Now remember the text here is opacity 0, meaning we can't see it. But now we want to set the opacity to 1, that when we hover over the hover image section or the div, we get to see this text. So hover underscore image. So we use a text class and see opacity, set it to 1. And that sums up everything. Then we save and refresh our page. Scroll all the way to the bottom. Now, first you can see that our image has been resized to a very smaller size. And now when we hover over it, our image now looks a bit lighter and our text is more vivid in this instance. Obviously, the positioning did not work out the way I thought it would, but I mean, the content is there. So you can play around with what is it? The top and you can play around with the left element and so you see maybe if you could position uh, the text element straight in the center of your image. And yeah, this basically sums up just some of the CSS. There are many, many, many other elements, many other methods, and I do not want to get too much into that because it will be a lot. And I'm not trying to confuse you because we're trying to progress to a stage where we can actually start building our own portfolio websites. So this is just what I think are the basics of CSS, and yeah, I really hope you learned quite a lot from this. I know I did. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I really hope that this video was very fun and insightful. Please make use of my plug resources in the description box to explore CSS in depth. And in our next video, we'll continue with some advanced CSS using one of my favorite frameworks called Bootstrap. So keep this web page handy, and I'll see you in our next video.